Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. I want to talk about landmark preservation and its importance. Landmark buildings have created vibrant neighborhoods, while landmark designations have saved many communities. And certainly one of the best people to talk to about this is Peg Breen, the president of the New York Landmarks Conservancy. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I've seen your picture on the news and in the newspapers recently, standing in front of this Picasso at the Four Seasons. That's such an interesting story. How did you even hear about it?
We own it.
You own it.
We own it. It was given to us when Vivendi owned the Seagram building. They were selling off some of the art. And Phyllis Bronfman Lambert, who helped create the Seagram building in the first place, said, no, this is an integral part of the restaurant, and give it to the Conservancy, and they'll keep it as a gift to the city.
That's so interesting.
So it was meant as a gift to the city, and we've had a curator look at it. We have it insured, and the idea was that we were to keep it there as long as the Four Seasons was an interior landmark, which it is, one of the loveliest interior landmarks in the country.
We talked about the restaurant. So
Yes,
everybody knows.
Four Seasons
Right.
restaurant. And when the commission designated the interior, another group that owned the building at the time was fighting the designation, so they were very conservative, and they didn't landmark the curtain because at that point they figured, well, if you could take it down so it wouldn't be a fixture. But now it's been there since 1959. It's stiffened with age. There was a backing put on it when it was conserved in the 70s that is also did its job well, but is also stiffened. So moving it now is an entirely different proposition. And it's the iconic heart of that restaurant. So even though it isn't an official landmark, that restaurant is of a piece, it's classic, and it really belongs there on the wall where it's always been, and we're trying to keep it there.
So you found out that the owner now wants to take it down.
Yes.
He says because it's in no condition? Is that what? Or there's a leak behind it?
Well, in November he said there was a leak. And of course, if there had been a leak that started in November, you'd be wading through the Four Seasons by now. So, but we're the Landmarks Conservancy, and we're always trying to fix landmark buildings. So we sent an engineer up, couldn't find any leak. So then the owner gave up for a while, then came back with, well, the wall is in danger. And so we have to take it down because we don't want the wall falling down on anybody or on the curtain. So we sent 2 more engineers, and they couldn't find any in imminent danger with the wall. There's a little mortar, that has been displaced. What he told me years ago after we first got the curtain was that he thought it would be much nicer to have rotating art there. And he buys and sells a lot of contemporary art.
Yeah.
And so I can only assume he would like to show that off there.
Yeah.
But it's hard to believe that the largest Picasso in America is really a burden to anybody.
Right. It was done as a stage set.
It was,
right?
it was
Part
painted,
of a
yes,
larger thing?
it was painted in 1919 for the Ballet Russe. And Picasso's wife, Olga, is there. Diaghilev, who was the mastermind of the Ballet Russe, is painted in profile. And Picasso's biographers consider this a really important work. And it happens to be at 19 feet high and probably 20 feet wide, the largest Picasso in America.
What I admire, I think the thing is beautiful and I love it there, but I also admired your bravery. Wasn't the owner once, was he the head of the board of the Conservancy?
No. We gave him an award.
Oh,
we gave him
I
a
see.
Chairman's Award many years ago when he restored Lever House.
I got it. All right.
And he restored that. He takes good care of the exterior of the Seagram building. So there's
That's
nothing
good.
personal
Okay.
here.
Right.
But
Does he understand that?
oh, I think so.
Oh, good. All
Because
right.
this is really, we're trying to fulfill
What you
the
did.
obligation that we took on when we were given the curtain.
Just briefly tell me about the Conservancy.
The Conservancy is now 41 years old. That makes us one of the oldest and actually one of the largest preservation groups in the country. And very few of the preservation groups, unfortunately, have, aside from advocacy, there are very few financial and technical programs to help people, but we've always had financial and technical help. We have low-interest loans, we have emergency grants for nonprofits, we have one of the very few grant programs in the country for landmark religious buildings. So in 41 years, we've loaned and granted more than $40 million. And if you total up the projects that we've contributed to, it's about $1 billion worth of restoration work all over New York.
And it's really important, that restoration work, isn't it? Because some people fight landmarking because they say it's going to be too expensive to maintain.
And you know, in some instances, there may be a larger initial cost, but over the life of your building, you're really maintaining it better and you're saving its value in the long run. There was a woman in a large apartment building that a number of the residents did not want to be landmarked. And she confronted me and said, you know, landmarks made our architect change the mortar and it cost us another $1,500. And I said, well, I know that doesn't sound like important, but mortar actually is really crucial. And if it's not the right kind of mortar, it gets too hard and the building, when it moves, will crack and spall and you might get leaks. So in the long run, that extra $1,500 could have saved you thousands and thousands of dollars because it's not going to do damage.
And a large part of your budget is private money. I mean,
the bulk is private money. Yes, yes.
Which makes it quite a remarkable organization.
Well, we have a $6 million revolving loan fund, which is also unique. And we worked back in the 80s with Senator Moynihan and the city and the state. And the Federal Archives building in the West Village was vacant surplus public property. And in those days, it was a giant white elephant. And so we bought it for $1 and did an RFP and found the developer who turned it into apartments and shops. And under the federal law at the time, a certain percentage of profits had to go back into community redevelopment. And so very smart people on our board worked with the senator and created our Historic Properties Fund. So we have given low-interest loans to people in Harlem and Upper Manhattan and parts of Brooklyn long before they were chic and trendy. And even now, we continue to loan over $1 million a year, and it all comes with our staff help. So we don't just say, here's the check, good luck. We help them find the contractors and the architects, and then we work with them to make sure that it's done correctly.
It was a New York City disgrace, basically, taking down Pennsylvania Station that gave the impetus to a new concentration on landmarking, right?
I think that's the one people remember the most, because if you were here and saw Penn Station, you thought it was horrible, and if you never saw Penn Station, you understand that this was a grievous thing to do and that the city's never recovered. I used to play there. A friend of mine and I would spend hours exploring there. It was a glorious place. So there were other things that came along too, but that's the one people remember, and people really understand, you know, what a loss that is. And that's why we stood with Senator Moynihan a long time ago now, trying to get a new station in the Farley Post Office, which is across from Madison Square Garden, which was the twin of the original Penn Station. And phase 1 is working away down there, though no one can see anything yet. And I think that we're determined to see a train hall finally put in there, because that will take all the Amtrak passengers out of Penn Station. And that's about 30% of the traffic. And it will eliminate overcrowding and will give room within the current Penn Station to do some renovations to make it a better place to go through. Do you think it really will happen in your lifetime? Well, I always say you have to be in preservation for the long haul, and I doubt Senator Moynihan would be too surprised, but it has to happen. It's a safety issue, it's a passenger comfort issue, and basically it was a glorious thing. I think when it was designed, it was designed to be the greeting to people coming to this very special metropolitan metropolis. I mean, it was just, that was what it was. Look at the difference between Penn Station and Grand Central. You cannot go into Grand Central without people on the balconies taking pictures, marveling at the place, and you feel ennobled walking through Grand Central. It's a joy to walk through Grand Central, and it is certainly horrible to go through Penn right now. So getting Moynihan is not some exercise in nostalgia. It will really help improve everybody's experience on train traffic all up and down the Eastern Seaboard. What was the campaign for Grand Central? Was it the air rights? What was it? It wasn't going to be destroyed, the station. No, they were going to build a giant tower on top of it. So that leads us now to the new effort of selling the air rights over historic sites, right? What's going to happen with that? Well, if you are an individual landmark, you've always been able to sell your air rights, usually either adjacent or kitty corner across the street. And within historic districts, you're pretty well trapped. So for instance, there are a lot of landmark religious institutions within a historic district with no place to sell air rights. So I think people have been trying for a long time to figure out how can you help some of the religious and nonprofit institutions that could use some assistance from selling air rights. And it's a tricky question, and no one has resolved the answer yet.
And it also gets carried over, so schools, they want to sell air rights over schools and other public buildings. Landmarking is basically an ingredient of land use, right?
Yes.
So do you work very closely with the agency, other agencies? Does the City Planning Commission work closely, or the Department of City Planning?
It has it in the past. It didn't necessarily under Bloomberg, and I think it had more sway than Landmarks. You know, Amanda Burden was a very exacting and forceful figure, and she was very close to the mayor. So I think, for instance, when the mayor proposed upzoning 70 blocks around Grand Central Station, City Planning marked in red areas that they thought would be likely development sites, and those were the great old masonry buildings surrounding the station. So within 70 blocks, there are probably a lot of nondescript buildings from the 70s and 80s that no one would miss. But City Planning picked out the ones that really give the area its iconic character.
The Yale Club and the...
The Yale Club, the Roosevelt Hotel, 125 Park, the Gray Bar Building.
Well,
And so Landmarks was in a real bind, and they calendared 5 of the buildings. But they're now waiting for a new chair and probably a lot of new commissioners, so nothing is really happening. And we'll see what happens when Midtown comes back.
And we see what's happening on West 57, on 57th Street. And just now, I mean, even if a building isn't totally landmarked, like the Rizzoli building, it was a lovely building.
Oh, it certainly was. And it wasn't the only one. There were 2 adjacent townhouses that were once lovely homes. And on the east side of Rizzoli was a terrific Cross and Cross building that once housed a showroom and offices for a piano company. And they were really landmarks. The commission decided they weren't, and they will probably inevitably be lost. And I think on 57th Street, I think what startled a lot of people is that the giant towers were pretty much as of right. So there was no public review, there was no chance to say or do anything, and they're starting to rise.
So that was, and that's raised the issue that's gotten so much attention about the shadows in Central Park.
Yes.
These high towers are how tall? Taller than
90, 100 stories.
Taller than the World Trade Center if you took the antenna off. Did I read someplace?
Well, the top floor is 103. So I don't necessarily think they're going to be taller. The antenna goes up from there.
But these are buildings plopped into neighborhoods.
57th Street was once the cultural center of New York. And you still, of course, have Carnegie Hall, and there are some landmarked areas.
And the Art Students League.
Art Students League, but which will soon have something cantilevered over it, which is going to be a really strange design that goes out over this little beautiful landmark and then up again. And the other thing about these new buildings is something came down in order for them to go up. And it's a relatively contained space on West 57th Street, and the commission, Landmarks Commission, should really very quickly go up and down that street to figure out what else should be landmarked, because there are a few other buildings that should be, and then make it clear this is to be saved and here's room for development. But it should be done with city planning, and there should be an overall look.
Because it's that combination that really makes the city exciting. I mean, we don't want to be one tall glass building after another.
No, for a couple of years now, real estate people seem to have this unfortunate complex about Shanghai. I don't know who would want to live in Shanghai these days. And we don't want to be Shanghai. And you're right, it is the mix. And where Rizzoli was, and the 2 adjacent townhouses, were your last look at when 57th Street was once a high-end residential street. And maybe you think of it when you walked by, maybe you didn't, but there was an unconscious joy, if you will, of walking through a street like that with different layers of history as you go along.
And they're beautiful buildings, too.
Yes.
They're so beautiful. Do you know how many of them are landmarked or not? Is Bergdorf's was landmarked, wasn't it?
No.
No?
No.
I have such a funny story, but it's too long to tell. It's during the Lindsay administration, and Sergeant Shriver's law firm was fighting a landmark designation. It was very funny. Anyway, it's not. In the Crown Building?
Nope. So you can start right on Fifth Avenue, and then, you know, work your way west.
Yeah. And I live at the other end of, really west, where they're now building also. Are those Con Ed, the power station at 50, is that a landmark?
Yes, it is.
That's a
I
landmark.
mean, that's McKim, Mead, and White.
Yeah. So around that is all this building. And with no attention to anything. I mean, there's going to be a great big, the largest apartment building built in the city will be right across the street from it. Anyway,
Well,
it's making me a little crazy.
Well, the Bloomberg administration never met a large project they didn't like, was my feeling about that. And people need new homes, and there's always room for growth in the city, but it has to be a balance, and there has to be some, I think, community input and larger scale input, because we all live here and we all contribute to the city, not just real estate developers. And so there's a balance that has to come back into it.
Do community boards, they focus on one building if it becomes an issue, but do they make recommendations, do you know?
For a larger area?
For landmarking or larger areas?
Well, Community Board 5 recommended, recommended landmarking Rizzoli a long time ago.
Right, and they also objected to the tower, the shadows.
Yes, yes.
Right. Was there anything that was decided could be done about that?
About the shadows?
Yeah.
Those are all as-of-right buildings, and there's no way to stop them now. So the question is the impact that they will have, and then how many more do you want there? How many more do you need there? And that's something that, again, needs a comprehensive city look with both planning and preservation at the table.
So what worries me also now is this drive to build, 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 higher, bigger, because we want the inclusionary housing, affordable inclusionary housing, to solve our housing problem, which we have, affordable housing. And that scares me.
I don't think there's any affordable housing going up on 57th Street.
But they did get some kind of a tax abatement because they had some kind of points. I mean, that's a different story. I'm not even talking about them now. But the building at the other end is building so large because it comes in under the inclusionary housing. And because the city now has this dire need for affordable housing. And that seems to be the housing policy. Which
and the Real Estate Board of New York claims that part of the problem is the historic districts, and that we're stopping the growth of affordable housing by creating historic districts. You're also keeping a lot of people in their homes in historic districts, and not every neighborhood should have a giant tower plopped down in the middle of it. It's the mix. And if you talk to affordable housing developers who are really nonprofits doing this, the real issue is the price of land in Manhattan. And most affordable housing is going up in Bronx and Queens, parts of Brooklyn. And it's a real mix, but an affordable housing developer also works with the community to make sure that what they're doing is something that fits within the community and at least has some buy-in from the community.
So as long as they're dedicated to building affordable housing, they're fine. But when they're dedicated to making a lot of money and building high things, then we have to question. But I want people to know that historic districts are not just in Manhattan.
Oh, of course not.
Let's talk about some of them that are outside.
Bob Tierney has been chairman of Landmarks throughout the Bloomberg administration, and from the very beginning, he said he wanted to get outside Manhattan and address some of the calls for preservation from throughout the city. And he's certainly done that. There have been huge additions to landmark areas in Brooklyn. There's a district up right now in Staten Island. And these are all neighborhoods that have asked to be landmarked. There was a waiting list of neighborhoods throughout the city waiting to be designated. And it's the people in the district who are asking for it.
I mean, there are parts of Grand Concourse, not the whole Grand Concourse, I don't think, is it?
No, but they've
parts of it.
Yes, parts of the Grand Concourse.
And I mean, they're very unexpected places. Of course, parts of Bed-Stuy, all over the city. People shouldn't be under the impression that it's only here in Manhattan and that we're trying to just
no,
keep it
absolutely
that way.
not. And again, it's people from the neighborhood who have asked the Landmarks Commission to do this, and they're going to leave a waiting list for whoever the next chairperson is too.
Right. And they leave a heritage. I mean, Sunnyside Gardens is just beautiful. Before it was landmarked, I understood that some owners would just build fences in their backyard and do all those things. I imagine Jackson Heights also is protected by it.
Parts of it. Places like Sunnyside Gardens, which were really built as middle-class housing with wonderful shared green space, are now prized places to live.
So great, yeah. So if you were going to make recommendations to the new, well, basically to the new mayor about how to empower the Landmarks Commission, what would you do?
I wouldn't use the word empower the Landmarks Commission.
Okay, because it does have power. I'm sorry.
No.
Oh.
What I'm saying is, I think, I just came back from a Landmarks conference in New Orleans. And Mayor Menino from Boston, who was mayor no longer, but a longtime mayor of Boston, spoke. The governor of Mississippi came in and spoke. And they all talked about what preservation meant to their city in terms of economic development, in terms of livable neighborhoods. There's a federal historic tax credit. The state also has a local one that really helps people stay in their homes, that helps developers create apartments and co-ops that people can afford. And I think there's got to be a basic understanding that preservation isn't a nostalgia game. It's about livability, it's about economic development. And all these preservation projects create thousands of local jobs. These are local jobs that are working and improving neighborhoods and buildings.
So how do we do it? Do we merge with city planning?
I don't think so, because I think that really subordinates it. I mean, there are cities that do have it that way, but I think Landmarks needs to be recognized for what it is, and I think it's going to be on a more equal footing with city planning.
And economic development.
And economic development, absolutely.
Will we do the South Street Seaport? Is that part of economic development? Does that totally fit into what we're talking about?
I think that's really scary, that giant proposed 50-story tower there. And that is one of the last places in the city where you can see what early 19th century New York looked like. And there are beautiful buildings.
My grandfather grew up there.
Really?
Slip.
And, they're a tourist attraction in their own right. I think the South Street Seaport Museum needs to be saved. It doesn't need to be driven out. With
That's
all
really terrible, isn't it?
It is. With all the tourism in Lower Manhattan, our office building looks down on Castle Clinton, where you get the lines for Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty. They fill Battery Park some days. There are so many people. But we really need more of a interconnectedness down there. There's the fabulous Smithsonian American Indian Museum. There's the South Street Seaport Museum. And we really need a much more cohesive way of getting people to really explore the rest of Lower Manhattan and see all the advantages there.
So how do we do that? It's the big question.
Well, we need to work more closely with, say, New York City and Company, with cultural affairs and the Tourism Bureau, et cetera. And it's not as if people aren't trying or haven't tried, but I really think there needs to be a more concentrated effort that is sustainable. The Downtown Manhattan Alliance had a bus for a while that you could go around, and it may still be there, pardon me if it is, but I haven't noticed it lately.
So we need, part of the job of preservationists is educating too, isn't it? So if there's a bigger public understanding?
Well, it's funny. I think the public, by and large, understands it and gets it. There's always somebody who thinks, oh, this is really going to just cost me a lot more money, so I'm opposed. But by and large, all those people waiting to be created in historic districts, that's a lot of people and a lot of voters. And it's ironic, because next year is the 50th anniversary of the city's landmarks law, which is one of the strongest in the country. And yet the buildup from the real estate forces, makes it look like we've hampered the economy and are doing all these, bad things for the city, when I think we're helping the city's growth. And again, making it a place that's livable with local jobs, not just today, but into the future. So it's something that I think we grapple with, and sometimes I think we talk too much among ourselves. But I really think that in the broad city populace, people understand why you want to protect these buildings and protect these neighborhoods.
Are there big plans for the 50th anniversary?
Yes.
Oh, good.
There is a huge coalition that Barbara Lee Diamonstein-Spielvogel put together. She was once on the city's commission, and also has a Landmarks Cultural Center. And so it's not just preservation groups, it's theater groups, it's museums, it's schools, it's any institution that is in a landmark building or understands landmark buildings, and everyone is going to be doing various programs, projects, celebrations throughout the year. Because we're one of the few that supports sacred sites. We've been doing sacred sites open house weekends. This will be our third throughout the state, but next year we're going to really concentrate on the city, and whether they've gotten one of our grants or not, we're going to encourage all the religious institutions in the city to really open their doors and let people see the beauty, the history, the social service programs that, that aid the community.
Your sacred sites, because we're almost at the end, is to help these institutions
protect
their buildings.
Yes, we give grants, one of the few people in the country that gives grants to these landmark religious institutions. And again, we help them analyze what's going on with their building and help them find appropriate people to fix it.
And what's your website?
www.nylandmarks.org.
And it's a very informational place to go, and people should do it, and they should contribute to your organization and support it, right?
What a good idea.
Well, I certainly hope that preservationists win in the land use battle. I can't, it's time.
Well, it's a battle worth fighting, and one that we need to win.
Right. Thank you, Peg Breen.
Thank you, Ronnie.
Thank you. If there are any people you'd like to hear and topics you'd like us to explore, please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.